Wembanyama is no longer just a young star with big promise. He is already changing how people talk about greatness in the NBA. That is the main point here. This is not about a player who might be special one day. This is about a player who is making legends, coaches, media people, and fans all stop and look again right now. For years, the league had a clear idea of what a 7-foot player should be. Stay close to the rim, protect the paint, rebound, set screens, finish easy shots. That was the path. But Wembanyama has stepped into the league and broken that picture apart. He moves like a guard, shoots like a wing, blocks shots like an all-time great big man, and affects both ends of the floor in a way that is hard to explain unless you actually watch him. That is why this changes everything. What makes this even bigger is how fast it has happened. A lot of people expected Wembanyama to be good. Some even expected him to be great. But many still thought the NBA would find a way to slow him down. They thought the size and skill were real, but they also thought there had to be limits. He was very tall, very thin, very young, and very different. That made people nervous. It made scouts wonder if he could handle the physical side of the league. It made some fans think the hype had gone too far. They believed that once stronger players leaned on him, once smarter teams studied him, and once the long season started wearing him down, the gap between hype and reality would show up. But instead of showing weakness, Wembanyama kept showing more and more of why the hype was actually too small. Now look at where things stand. His name is in the MVP talk. The odds have moved in his favor. The media is taking him more seriously with every game, and the reason is simple. He is not just putting up nice numbers, he is doing it against serious teams, in big moments, and with a full impact that goes far beyond points. When a player starts making an MVP case this early in his career, people usually think it is just noise. They think it is fun talk. But this feels different. Wembanyama is not getting attention because people want a fresh story. He is getting attention because the production, the winning, and the eye test are all lining up at the same time. That is what shocked so many NBA legends. It is not only that he is talented. Plenty of players come into the league with talent. It is that his talent is already turning into winning basketball at a level that is changing the whole path of a team. San Antonio was supposed to be patient. San Antonio was supposed to build slowly. The Spurs were supposed to be one of those teams that takes years to move from the bottom to the top. But when you have a player like this, the timeline changes. It changes fast. Suddenly, the rebuild does not feel like a rebuild anymore. Suddenly, the team is not talking about hope for the future. It is talking about real wins, playoff basketball, and a division title. That is a huge shift, and Wembanyama is at the center of it. The scary part is that he is doing all this without looking like a finished player. That might be the most important thing of all. This does not feel like the final version of Victor Wembanyama. It feels like the early version of something much bigger. That is why former players sound almost stunned when they talk about him. They are not just praising what he's doing now. They are trying to picture what happens if he gets even stronger, even smarter, and even more comfortable. And when they think about that, the reaction is always the same. It sounds like a warning to the rest of the league. Think about what he has already done in some of these big games. Against Boston, one of the smartest and toughest teams in the league, he put up a monster line with 39 points, 11 rebounds, 8 threes, and 2 blocks. That is not normal. That is not just a great game for a young player. That is a game.
These are games where people are watching closely to see if the hype matches the reality. And every time Wembanyama gets one of those chances, he looks more sure of himself. He does not play like a young player hoping not to mess up. He plays like someone who already knows he belongs at the top. That confidence matters because it changes how everyone around him reacts. His teammates trust him more. Coaches trust him more. Opponents fear him more. And once fear enters the picture, the game gets even easier for a star like that. A lot of this story goes back to one simple mistake people made when they first saw him. They judged him by old rules. They saw a giant and thought about old giant players. They tried to fit him into a role that made sense to them. But Wembanyama is not following that old path. He does not play like a big man trying to copy guard moves once in a while. He really moves and reads the game like a guard. That changes everything. It changes spacing. It changes matchups. It changes how a defense has to prepare. Most teams know what to do with a center. They may not stop a great one, but they at least know the kind of plan they want to use. With Wembanyama, the plan keeps breaking. Tony Parker saw this before most people did. That matters because Parker knows what greatness looks like in San Antonio. He played with Tim Duncan. He won titles. He spent years inside one of the smartest systems in basketball. He was not the kind of person to get carried away by hype. So when he believed in Wembanyama early, that should have told everybody something serious. Parker understood that Wembanyama was not just another tall player with nice touch. He saw the full picture. He saw a player with guard skills and a giant body, and he knew that the league had not really seen anything quite like that before. Then came the draft, and the hype became even louder. People called him the biggest prospect since LeBron James. That is a huge thing to say. Those are words that come with real pressure, and with pressure came doubt. There were people who said he was too thin. There were people who said he would break down. There were people who said the NBA schedule would wear him out. There were people who said teams would push him off his spots and make life hard for him. Some of those concerns sounded fair at the time, but what is wild now is how quickly those doubts started looking weak. One of the early moments that really changed the conversation came against Anthony Davis. That was the kind of test people had been waiting for. Davis is long, smart, skilled, and one of the best defenders of his era. If anyone was supposed to bother Wembanyama, it was a player like that. But instead of getting overwhelmed, Wembanyama put up a huge game with more than 30 points, 13 rebounds, and 6 blocks. He scored, he protected the rim, and he did it against the kind of defender people thought would expose him. That is when the tone started changing. That is when doubt started turning into disbelief. Even the reactions from other stars started sounding different. Anthony Davis, after seeing him up close, gave one of the clearest answers anyone could give. He basically said the answer was prayer. Think about that. A great defender looks at a young player and says the best plan is prayer. That tells you how rare this is. That tells you the normal game plans are not working. That tells you people are not dealing with a normal star. They're dealing with someone who is making elite defenders feel helpless in ways they're not used to feeling. And it did not stop there. On opening night against Dallas, Wembanyama exploded again. 40 points, 15 rebounds, 3 blocks, and no turnovers. That last part matters so much. No turnovers. For a player his size, with the ball in his hands that much, making that kind of impact without giving the ball away is insane. That is a sign of control. That is a sign of feel. That is a sign of a player who is not just wild talent, but real basketball understanding. He is not running around making lucky plays. He knows what he's doing, and that is what makes the whole thing even more serious. When media voices started changing their opinions, that mattered too. People who talk about the league every day began to admit that what they were seeing was moving faster than expected. And that's a big deal, because those voices usually take time before fully giving in to a young player. They wait, they look for weak spots, they want proof over time. But Wembanyama kept forcing the issue. He kept putting together games that made the old doubts sound weak. At a certain point, it became harder to deny him than to praise him. Still, if you really want to understand why this changes everything, that is where the fear lives. A lot of players can score. Very few players can make the whole floor feel smaller for the other team. Wembanyama does that. He makes drivers think twice. He makes passers hesitate. He makes big men rush shots they normally finish. He makes coaches change what they want to run. That is real power. That is why some legends have brought up names like Bill Russell when talking about his impact. Not because Wembanyama is the same player, but because of the feeling he creates. Russell was known for changing the game before a shot even happened. He made teams afraid of the paint. He changed decisions before the play was complete. Wembanyama does some of that now. It is not only about the blocks that show up in the box score, it is about the shots that never get taken because he is standing there. It is about the simple passes that suddenly feel dangerous. It is about the way one player can bend a whole offense without touching the ball. That is what Jerry West meant when he talked about presence. Presence is more than stats. Presence is when the game feels different because one player is on the court. Presence is when everyone knows where that player is, even if the camera is focused on someone else. Wembanyama has that already, and that should scare everyone. Most players take years to build that kind of effect. Some never build it at all.
He already has it, and he is still so early in his career. The numbers on defense are wild, too. Leading the league in blocks is one thing, but the blocks do not even fully tell the story because so many of his best defensive plays do not end with a block. They end with a player turning away. They end with a forced pass. They end with a rushed shot. They end with a broken play. That is what great defenders do. They don't just clean up mistakes. They create fear before the offense can even get comfortable. And with Wembanyama's length, timing, and quick movement, that fear spreads all over the floor. When Hakeem Olajuwon speaks highly of a big man, people listen. Hakeem knows footwork, timing, rim defense, and balance better than almost anyone. So when someone like that sees Wembanyama up close and sounds impressed, it matters. That is not random praise. That is a legend seeing real greatness in the details. And when he says the sky is the limit, that does not sound like empty talk. It sounds like a warning. It sounds like he sees a player whose growth is just beginning. There is another part of this story that matters just as much, and that is mindset. Jamal Crawford talked about the little things. That line says a lot. The little things are what separate stars from legends. Talent gets attention. Habits build careers. If Wembanyama is already that good and still acts like there is more work to do after a huge game, then the rest of the league has a serious problem on its hands. The great ones never act fully satisfied. They always want more. They always think there is another level waiting. And when a player with his gifts also has that kind of mind, the ceiling starts to feel impossible to find. That is what people mean when they say he may be better than the hype. Think about how crazy that sounds. The hype for Wembanyama was already huge before he ever played an NBA game. People were calling him once in a generation. People were treating him like the future of the league. And now, after watching him up close, some are saying even that was not enough. That means the player is growing faster than the words used to describe him. That is very rare. Usually, hype gets too big. In this case, the player is stretching past it. Dwight Howard also said something interesting when he compared Wembanyama to Kareem for this era. That is a heavy name to bring up. Kareem means size, touch, skill, long-term greatness, and a style that felt hard to solve. But what makes Wembanyama even stranger is that he brings modern skills on top of that old-school size. He can rise up from deep. He can put the ball on the floor. He can make plays from the elbow. He can run in space. He can defend all over the floor. So even when people use huge names to describe him, it still feels like part of the picture is missing. And maybe that is the clearest sign of all. People keep trying to compare him to past legends, but none of the comparisons feel perfect. That is usually what happens when a player starts creating his own lane. You can hear little pieces of other greats in the way people talk about him, but the full...
This is one of the best places a player like Wembanyama could land. That matters because structure can turn talent into dynasty-level success. If he had all this talent in a messy situation, maybe there would be more doubt. But in San Antonio, the feeling is different. It feels planned. It feels serious. It feels built to last. That is why the team's success matters so much in this story. When the Spurs start winning big, when they lock in a playoff spot, when they win their division, and when they beat strong teams again and again, the whole conversation gets louder. Winning changes everything. A lot of young stars put up numbers on teams that do not matter yet. Wembanyama is doing his thing while moving a franchise forward in a major way. That gives his case more weight. It tells fans and voters that this is not empty greatness. This is greatness with real team results behind it. His own words about the MVP race also matter. He did not run from the question. He made the case. He said defense is half the game, and he is right. A lot of MVP talk gets stuck on points, but defense is huge, and Wembanyama impacts that side as much as anyone. He also made it clear that his offense is about more than scoring. That is another smart point. Great offense is not just points, it's pressure, it's spacing, it's passing, it's how the defense reacts to you. When Wembanyama is on the floor, everything shifts. Defenders move differently. Help comes earlier. Lanes open. Fear shows up. That is value, and he knows it. What makes this all feel so different is that every time people think they found a weak spot, it disappears. Too thin, he holds up. Too young, he controls big games.